And a very good morning to you if you've just tuned in. We're live from London. You're with Monocle on Sunday with me, Emma Nelson. Coming up today, my guests share their views on the week's biggest stories. Isabel Hilton, what have you spotted? A very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Emma. Well, there is so many interesting things going on. If you can hear them above the noise made by Musk and Trump. So my mission this year is to find ways of turning particularly Elon Musk, just turn him off. It really, there's no room to think. When you've done that, you will notice, for example, that Ukraine has captured 2 North Korean soldiers who've been fighting on behalf of the Russians. We'd be very interested to see what they're doing. On a kind of wider scale, there's a lot of interest in what Rachel Reeves has been doing in China, whether she has come back with a goodie bag, whether it was worth it, and what the Labour policy actually is on China.
Thank you, Isabel. We'll be checking in with our correspondent guide, Launey.
Insults fly as Croatians pick their president at the polls, and Slovenia's cycling sensation gets speedy on skis. Coming up in a roundup from Monocle's man in the Balkans, that's me, Guy Launey.
Plus, we'll be heading from our editorial director, Tyler Brûlé, who's out and about in St Moritz this morning. It is the 12th of January 2025. Live from London, this is Monocle on Sunday.
Live from London, this is Monocle on Sunday with Emma Nelson.
And a very good morning to you if you have just tuned in. A very good morning to you, Isabel. Welcome back to the studio and welcome back to the Sunday studio. You spent your Christmas up a mountain, didn't you?
Sort of up a mountain, yes. Well, up in Argyll, in the West Highlands of Scotland.
And I said to you, how was it? And you said it was grey.
It was grey, as it can be. I hate to break the news that it rains quite a lot in Argyll, and when it's not raining, it's thinking about raining quite a lot of the time. So, it was pretty grey and dark. But what happens at that time of the year in the grey and the dark is that people really turn to partying in quite a big way. So it's a lot of fun. You see a lot of old friends.
And did you join in that part of the culture?
Absolutely. I and my 2 young people and partners, I managed to get the 2 men dressed in kilts, which was not their native dress, in order to go to the open ball, where you have to be a dab hand, as they say, at the reel of the 51st and the posties jig. So there was a lot of intense training went on, but it was good fun. It was great fun.
That sounds amazing. Let us head now to St Moritz, up to the mountains, to join our editorial director, Tyler Brûlé. A very good morning to you, Tyler.
Good morning, Emma.
Did you hear any of that there was a requirement for kilts to be worn by Isabel's family? I'm assuming that. Well, I've just had a quick look at the temperatures in St Moritz. It looks like it's minus 15. Any sign of a kilt where you are?
No sign of a kilt. But I am all for national dress, fancy costumes, and as you know, any excuse to wear a bit of tracht, I am there. I can tell you, I had a very fine velvet deer horn number on only 12 hours ago. No party, just a very nice dinner at the palace. And I can tell you, Meteo Schweiz is reporting it's exactly minus 16.2 here right now. So it's chilly outside.
And are you outside, or because sometimes you go for a ramble when we're on the air, and you do us a bit of a show and tell. Oh, are we rambling this morning, Tyler, or are we not doing minus 16?
I am outdoors right now. I am watching them groom the lake. The lake is frozen. There's always a very small patch of maybe, 100 square meters that does not freeze over. But they're getting it ready for the white turf, which is coming up. So I'm watching white Land Cruisers on a beautiful snowy lake, just preparing the path, of course, for the horse races, which will be coming up in the coming weeks.
Incredible stuff. So tell me, what does minus 16.2 feel like on a Sunday morning?
It's absolutely fine. If you've got Uniqlo Heat Tech long johns on, if you've got a good Kandahar boot. Now, this is something for listeners. If you're sort of faffing around, you're at that point in the season, you didn't buy any or didn't receive any Christmas boots under the tree, but you're still thinking, I need a good winter boot. Kandahar, fantastic name for a shoe company, all made in Switzerland. And they only stick to about 5 or 6 styles. Emma, you'd absolutely love them. They do a number which probably once upon a time I'm sure was made out of seal skin. It's now pony skin, made to look like seal skin. And then there's the nice little zip number. I'm not doing that. I'm doing a slightly higher a higher number with a crepe sole, and they're perfect. And a good Arpentour jacket. I'm not sure if it's made in Lyon, but great designers from Lyon. So I'm perfectly cozy outside.
As long as you keep warming. Well, I must confess, I have the Uniqlo Heat Tech leggings on this morning, and it's only -1. So,
yeah, I'm not sure those are going in Studio One, but anyway.
No, they're working perfectly. They've turned the heating down. And this pony skill, dare I ask, do they have any connections to what happens on the lake in St Moritz to the losers?
Yeah, I do wonder what happens to those poor ponies who have to make their way back to other parts of Europe, and whether they do indeed end up in the glue factory or not. Tell
us, how's your week been?
My week has been a rather busy one. Of course, we spoke exactly a week ago. Was prepping to, of course, make my way back down to lower altitudes. It was a great welcome back, of course, to Zurich. Everybody generally back in the office, and then I was off to Paris. In Paris for a few days this week, seeing our colleagues, and of course, lots going on there with, of course, just stepping up our activities in France. And then back on the TGV to Zurich on Friday, and then back up in the mountains, and then back down again tomorrow.
Excellent. How are trains at the moment? Because I know in the past you've made a slight, direct call for people to up the standards of the TGV between Zurich and Paris.
Yeah, well, listen, this is a joint venture, so between Switzerland and France by the two state railroad companies, SBB in Switzerland, of course, SNCF in France. Listen, it's not a bad service. It's called TGV Lyria. It's the same rolling stock that SNCF uses most places. I would say sort of the only sort of add-on is that you get some announcements in German. I wouldn't say that it's sort of playing to the best of any culinary strengths of France or Switzerland. It's just a bit neither here nor there. And you think Switzerland, France, countries which are known for great infrastructure, of course known for hospitality. They know a thing or two about good design, maybe even a comfortable chair. And you just think they could put a little bit more into it. It's just it's all a bit lackluster. But anyway, at least it's there. At least it's going over 300 kilometers an hour, and it generally does the trick. But I think there is room for improvement. And
when we go to Paris, we have the new bureau in Rue Bachamont. How is that going?
Well, that's a construction project. I am told that we should have been opening. We were set to. Well, listen, you know me. I wanted to be open before Christmas, but all of the whole, let's say, fit out, furniture, tables, banquettes, everything, the bar, it's all being built in the hills up above Beirut. Of course, my colleagues, my COO in particular, thought, okay, you are nuts that you are going with this architecture firm who have all of their manufacturing, up in the hills, I believe, sort of, way up above Byblos. They've been doing it for 50 years. And why are we going with this company? At a point, of course, when much of this is the summertime and going into the autumn, of course, when much of Beirut was being bombed by Israel. And I said, look, these people have been at it for 50 years. They say they've never missed a deadline, and we have to believe them. So I am told that probably somewhere off the coast of Sicily right now, there are containers. They have left Beirut. They will arrive in France this week, and then they will make their way, I guess, from Marseille up to Rue Bachamont, and then we start the fit-out for the space.
I know you want to talk about Sicily in a moment, but first, I think we do need to touch on the fact that earlier this week we had you on the Monocle Daily moments after Justin Trudeau had stepped down, and these enormous question marks were being raised about the future of Canada, what it stands for, and where indeed it actually is going to fit.
Absolutely, and this was, of course, we were on our game, having a very good conversation also with our Thomas Lewis in Toronto. Yeah, and I spent a little bit of time, more than a little bit of time, yesterday thinking about this. It's in my column today in our weekend edition, and yeah, just exploring a little bit, or more than a little bit, maybe what's gone wrong in Canada, what has to be done, and of course, what type of leader I believe the nation should be looking for. And I guess the concluding point is Trudeau, of course, came to the stage at a time with lots of other young leaders. He was very much of a particular moment. But we have to remember, yes, I mean, from a political dynasty in a way. But this was a gentleman who was a school teacher. Yes, he lived on the world stage, but he wasn't really engaged on the world stage. It wasn't like he was plucked from a major multinational. It wasn't that he had done his time in Canada's diplomatic service and was connected around the world. This was someone who came out of secondary school education and of course, rose to be the leader of a G7 country. That profile is not what Canada needs right now. Canada needs someone who can take the nation out into the world. It needs someone who can pick up the phone, who has connections, both in the public and the private sector, in capitals all over the world. Has to be, of course, and this is, I think, very interesting what Isabel was saying. And good morning, Isabel, by the way. Good morning. At the start of the program, that Canada has to wrestle with everything that's going to come out of Washington, also, as we know, the new parallel, or you could say sort of the new winter capital, perhaps, Palm Beach. And that, of course, will be a distraction. You could say it's always been a distraction, of course, through many governments in Canada. Sometimes it was also and it has been a very good complement in a way as well. But I think Canada also has to look to engage elsewhere. And so what are those capitals where the nation needs to be spending time? And I just sort of end on this, Emma. I think that, the country also needs to get serious about its role in NATO. Canada is building more ships. There is a procurement program for more submarines. There is an order for new aircraft. But for a country which has the world's longest coastline, and for one of the world's biggest nations, a massive airspace, let's face it, it really does rely on the United States for quite literally extra air cover. And again, listen, if Washington is going to take the country seriously, then it really needs to be able to pull its weight.
Isabel, you want to join in on this? Is the idea that Tyler has just illustrated a country which effectively acts as the world's backup?
Yes.
And needs to do a bit more.
I completely agree. And one of the rather astonishing things about Canada, given where it's situated, is that of all the NATO members, it doesn't have an Arctic strategy. And it's quite extraordinary. It's very much taken its defence for granted. I think that, that it's not under threat, that it is, its longest border, its long border, its only border is with the United States. But I think that, Canada may be having to wake up to new realities at this point.
Tyler, what are your thoughts on that? The absence of an Arctic strategy is something that they don't have any time to waste on that, do they?
No, it is astonishing because when people think about Canada, they do think about yes, maybe there are lakes, and you think about the prairies, and you think about nice coves in Nova Scotia, but I think a lot of people just think about this vast expanse of ice and snow, and maybe even also they might think about Santa Claus as well. But we don't want to get into a fight with our new NATO friends in Finland over that. But it's remarkable. So Canada's, of course, procured. In fact, I think they've just taken delivery of one of their last Arctic patrol ships. Very, very late to the party. There's, of course, a discussion right now to look at procuring, of course, 2 substantial icebreakers to replace the very aging icebreakers that the nation has. So this is, it is quite stunning that there is no program. And this is one thing from a defense and security perspective that the nation needs to look at. But then the other side is, I can remember talking to, and this is, I think we often, Emma, talk about, of course, the state of youth. We're reflecting sometimes on the very youngster that is, I think, living within your 4 walls. We're looking at the state of education. And one of the remarkable things, and I'm sure Isabel will have thoughts on this as well, I was talking to a Canadian diplomat a few years ago in Singapore, and he was the High Commissioner to Singapore, and he had a really interesting comment because he was talking about that notion of just being able to venture out into the world and how important it is for a country to be globally connected. And of course, it just can't be that your leader or your leadership is globally connected, but the importance of getting out, taking a gap year, or when you graduate, going and taking that job for 3 or 4 years and building a proper international network. And his point was, he said, if I think about a similar Commonwealth country in terms of size, scale, shared history, etc., he goes, I think about Australia. And he said, Australia dances circles around Canada when it comes to, and he was just referring to the financial services sector, that he said, there, he goes, you've got young, bankers who are working for ANZ, Westpac, the Aussie banks, etc. But he said they're super connected, of course, to people working for UBS and working for Goldman Sachs and working for JP Morgan. He said, later in life, because they've been out in the world. And he said the challenge that Canadians have is, of course, you graduate and you might go on your European tour for 1 month, but you're not setting down temporary roots somewhere, that you're not going and cutting your teeth somewhere else in the world. Of course, yes, many young Canadians do go abroad, but he said it's not in the same way that young Australians, young Kiwis do. So again, I think that this is, another program that the Canadian government, should be looking at. How do you encourage young Canadians to leave the nest and to, of course, gain experience in a variety of sectors around the world, and in line with that, how do you also make diplomacy an attractive career right now as well? And again, the challenge that Canada has is that it's been selling off its embassies at an alarming rate. That doesn't mean it's sort of stepping away from, of course, having ambassadors and consuls and defense attachés in cities. What it does mean, though, is that they don't have the residences, they don't have the perks. And I come back to where we started this program, Isabel talking about Elon Musk. If you're graduating right now and you can go and work for Starlink, or you can go and get a great marketing job at Tesla or any number of companies, big tech, of course, has huge salaries. And we've been through this era right now of sort of cuts. We know sort of the narrative about elites, et cetera. And so what happens? We get governments, Canada, a case in point, where they want to shutter embassies. They don't want to have a high-profile place with a Canadian flag sort of fluttering on the front of a fantastic residence, a great building. You better save money, better sort of, whack that office up in an office tower. Well, that's all fine, but, if you could only pay your diplomat $150,000 a year, you need to give them something to be competitive. So maybe they do deserve a tennis court or something else. These are sort of, the fixed perks of the job, because otherwise they're going to go work for somewhere they're going to make $400,000 or $500,000 a year, no matter how much they like their country. So I think that's sort of a reset that we also need to be looking at. And Canada's not alone, but I would say that Canada, certainly from a G7 perspective, is probably one of the biggest culprits.
Canada has the most potential, arguably, to improve. I mean, from what Tyler's describing there is, there's so much scope. But I mean, Isabel, how easy a fix would that enormous shopping list that Tyler's just given be?
That is quite a shopping list. But curiously enough, I think that both Canada and the UK they're facing a similar problem. And the big reason is that they have both depended in the post-war era on certain assumptions about the United States, what it does, what its role is, what it offers, and what it demands. And all of that is changing. I take part in a track 2 exchange between Canada and the UK. And I remember a couple of years ago, a Canadian diplomat very, very politely and gently, in that kind of moment in these exchanges where you're thinking, what can we learn from each other? All these kind of polite conversations. And the Canadian rather shocked the room by saying, well, Canada has some lessons perhaps for the United Kingdom in how to be a small country, which of course for the UK at present was, that's where we are post-Brexit. We're a rather smaller country and we do have to learn some lessons. And, you add to that the uncertainty about the direction the United States is going to take, or at least over the next 4 years. And I think that there are very interesting conversations to be had about what your profile is in the world, how much you spend on defence, what shape that defence would be, what other alliances you need to guarantee some kind of security in the world. And in Canada's case, at least, with a kind of rapidly changing Arctic, it has tremendous potential. It has fantastic resources of rare earths and minerals, and it is in command of one of the potential sea routes, the new sea routes which are opening up. So Russia dominates the Northern Passage and Canada the Northwest Passage. And it'll be very interesting to see the conversation about sovereignty on those passages. Are they international waters? Are they territorial waters? And Canada's going to be a key part of that. So it has become a country to watch.
Tyler, who are the names that we need to look out for as potential contenders to replace Trudeau? I know Mark Carney's name popped up quite a bit.
Indeed, and actually the field has been narrowing. So we started the weekend with, I think there was almost up to maybe 12 contenders now, not declared, but of course where you had the major Canadian media outlets, think tanks, etc., looking at quite a long list. I think now it is, if you look at the Canadian press and sort of certainly what I've been hearing, probably since Friday as well, the field is quite narrow now. So obviously Chris Freeland, who of course stepped down some months ago, this was quite a high profile ministerial departure, and then indeed of course Mark Carney, and very much sort of a name which is sort of at the fore right now. I think a lot of people saying with Freeland that yes, someone who has done some would argue, did an excellent job on the world stage, and some would also say that did very little to actually do many of the things that maybe Isabel and I have just been talking about, and maybe did not quite turn out to be the stateswoman that people thought she would be. But anyway, nevertheless, of course, a long-serving member in the Trudeau government, and that just might be her challenge, going for this Liberal leadership post. That is she too tainted with the Trudeau brush? She was, really part of, of course, the cabinet for a very long time. So is she seen as a little bit too close? The flip side, of course, is you have someone like Mark Carney. Now he's been out of the country for a while. He's back. But of course, he was the governor of the Bank of England. He held a similar post in Canada. So a name which is well known to Canadians, but he's never held a political post like this one. Of course, you would argue, though, as well, that being the governor of the Bank of England is such a role. And I would say the challenge there, though, is, you have, of course, this narrative, like in many places, is Carney seen as an elite? Is he seen as too global? Of course, holding very substantial chairmanship type posts right now with Bloomberg, with Brookfield, of course, one of the biggest asset group or asset management and property groups in the world. So yes, many people will say, disconnected, out of touch, all of those things. But again, he's a Canadian boy who grew up in the country, but has international experience. So from my perspective, we've also seen the foreign minister, Ms. Joly. She's also stepped out of the post as well, and I think this is the type of role that we'd be looking for, the type of person who has international engagement. So she's out, and so let's see. We're supposed to see hats officially maybe thrown into the ring, later on today, or at some point, certainly very, very early next week.
Thank you for that, Tyler. Can I draw your attention to a story? I don't often like to spring stuff on you out of the blue, but there's an excellent article in the NZZ on a completely different subject. But I remember we mentioned we began this program talking about the joys of uniform and dress. The NZZ is reporting that the Swiss Army is abolishing dress uniform unless they're out on tour. And this is what they're doing is they've been issuing the 95 standard uniform. I'm wondering whether you can pluck that out of your mind, what it looks like. For representative purposes only as needed. The Defence Department's trying to save 55 million Swiss francs by 2035, and 20,000 new uniforms cost 300 Swiss francs each. They're not going to be bought. So that smart blue and grey and beret uniform is no longer going to be de rigueur. Your reaction, please.
Well, you didn't quite spring it on me, because it was was one of those stories that I read before going to bed last night. So anyone who spends time in Switzerland, Thursday evening and certainly on Fridays and then maybe Sundays or Monday mornings as well, you see, of course, all of the conscripts traveling back and forth, and sometimes they can be in their fatigues in Switzerland, and of course sometimes they are in this uniform which is now being put out to pasture now. And I think one of the great things about that NZZ piece as well, as I said, it is going to do something for the style stakes, because this is a uniform, as lovely as the hard-wearing wool blend might be. I mean, it looks like you're wearing a bunch of plywood planks. It looks like it was maybe developed. And this is remarkable in Switzerland. I mean, it looks like it could have very easily been developed in one of the ateliers that might be at the back of Kim Jong-un's palace, because it almost feels a little bit North Korean, rather rigid, rather shapeless. And the trousers, your legs can be sort of, I'm sure sort of, striding away underneath, but the fabric just doesn't move. So I have to say, it really does nothing for the brand. Domestically, I think people passing through Switzerland, internationally. Now, they're going to be holding a couple thousand of those back, Emma, because it still will. There will still be, and of course, soldiers will be able to request these if you have ceremonial duties, if you're in a marching band, if you have diplomatic duties, if you have to, of course, potentially join in a NATO discussion as an observer, you will still need to have a uniform. So, of course, the factories who are making the fabrics and I can't even say they're stitching them together. They look like they're welding these suits. Exactly. They're still going to have a little bit of business, but now you will see that, and most of the time as well, that when you see Swiss conscripts, heading out. And I have to say, right now the trains are very, very busy with soldiers on the move, because Davos is getting underway this time next week. So already last week you could see it was remarkable heading down from the mountains last weekend. The amount of soldiers on the trains of Graubünden heading up here to, of course, secure the valleys, approaches, airspace, etc., around the World Economic Forum in Davos. Anyway, listen, I love a great uniform, as we said at the top of the show. I love dress up, but I think this is something which will belong in one of the military museums here.
Briefly, Isabel, I mean, you're looking at a picture of them right now. I mean, I've never seen a pair of trousers that can make a man's leg look so short. And secondly, I mean, they look as if they're made of a kind of material that, were you to sit on a train with them, that the amount of static electricity generated would make everybody's hair go vertical.
It's pretty grim, isn't it? But I have a with respect, a bit of advice. That the army that wins hands down the global contest for fancy dress is the Indian Army. If you're ever in Delhi on Army Day, there is a parade which is absolutely spectacular, the range and variety of costume. I have no idea how well they fight, but boy, do they dress. I would send a consultant, honestly, to Switzerland to see if they can help.
Tyler, we're going to release you from your freezing outdoors view in just a moment. Thank you so much for staying with us for the first half of the programme. But you wanted to talk, we mentioned a Sicilian touch a moment ago. You want us all to sort of abandon our Uniqlo rugged thermal-lined fleecy leggings and go on a retreat in Sicily.
And did you check? Listen, this is listeners. This is something I sent to Emma just before going on air, because of course we all get a variety of great newsletters on a weekend morning. One of my favorites is Aficionados. If you're not familiar with Aficionados, it's a great collection of hotel properties. They have a particular fondness for the Alps. I would even say Südtirol in particular. Emma, you probably know a few of those properties, but it is really it's so well. I'm not going to use the curated word. It's so well edited. Their approach to who comes into the group is amazing. And yes, so I sent you. There's a star property today, which is a property called Susafa it says it's about 100 kilometers. I believe it's 100 kilometers north of Palermo. or is it south of Palermo? But anyway, it is very inland. And if you look at the pictures, it's a wonderful masseria, and it just looks absolutely sublime. So this is just a little tip for our listeners. If you're in a chilly part of the Northern Hemisphere, you're already thinking about summer. I just like the fact that there's rather sort of sunnily, it's the opening page says open April 14th. So that's not very far away. You're just sort of 3 months out, so you can start planning. But any thoughts? Looks delightful, no?
It looks like the most gentle place to go to. It seems very, very calm and it seems like a very quiet place in the nicest possible way. Insofar as from the pictures that I've seen, and I have been Googling furiously while you've been saying that, it's muted, it's gentle, and it just seems somewhere where actually when we are in the freezer that we are living in at the moment, it seems like another world.
I have to ask, because I didn't go through all of the imagery. It was just what was in the newsletter. Any goats or donkeys spotted so far?
Not yet. Do we need to ring ahead?
I think we might. Listen, I mean, what I saw from the helicopter or drone shot, though, this is a massive expanse. I'm sure there can't be, a donkey or goat too far away. There must be something at a neighboring property. So I think it is indeed worth a phone call. It
will have to be a very well-kept donkey and an extremely well.
Can I just ask how is the UK coping with of course, this freeze? I mean, one of the stories that I saw, and this is one of the remarkable ones, because there was a very good story on the website Unheard just before Christmas, or it could have been late November, which was, and Isabel, you might have a view on this one, which was talking about the UK's issue with having, well, of course, like many places, but a just-in-time delivery culture, and it was. But this was really sort of talking about the nation has no fuel reserves, has no food supplies, etc. That things can go very, very wrong very, very quickly. And there was a piece in the Times 2 days ago which talked about that we were sort of at the 4-day mark from running out of gas in the UK. I'm wondering if those supplies have been topped up, or does everyone have their thermostats down?
We've all got our thermostats. Well, no, we've all got our thermals on and the thermostats down. The freezing fog was a thing yesterday. What's happened is, from my experience of driving around outside London in the last couple of days, is that the local councils, in their wisdom, have decided to do major roadworks at this time of year, because obviously the clock is ticking on the budgets, which all sort of click over at the beginning of April. So they dig up all the roads. So when you have freezing fog and loads of roadworks, you can imagine what happens next. It is not Switzerland, put it that way. Isabel?
Just to reassure you, Tyler, we haven't actually run out of gas yet. I mean, certainly the demand went up, but as long as the supply keeps flowing in, I think we'll be okay. We don't have a lot of storage, it's true. But there are a lot of other issues around UK energy which are going to need major investment, not least the grid, because at the moment you've got lots of wind farms producing lots of energy, and the grid can't always take it. So a lot of curtailment, a lot of wasted effort there, which is going to need quite radical revision.
Tyler, thank you so much for joining us on the line from St Moritz. Stay warm. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Our editorial director, Tyler Brûlé there, giving us the latest from his viewpoint.
Slumming it in St Moritz.
Slumming it, poor man, in the cold. Actually, I mean, to put it, put a bit of a comparison on it, there are headlines left, right and centre this morning about the fact that there's a hamlet in the Scottish Highlands which hit minus 18.7.
That is pretty chilly.
Is this your neck of the woods?
Well, it's a little bit north of my original neck of the woods. I'm originally from the east coast of Scotland, from Aberdeenshire, and actually migrating to the west coast was a major culture shock. But leaving that aside, when I was in primary school in Afford, Aberdeenshire, we could count regularly every winter on several days off because the schools would be closed. And my father was the local doctor and had to get around, quite serious blizzards. So when we saw, on pictures on television of 2 inches of snow, we kind of scoffed because I remember after one blizzard, we opened the back door of the house and all you could see was a wall of snow with the imprint of the back door on it. So, we're fairly used on the East Coast to that kind of event, but still the temperatures in the last week have been pretty noteworthy.
Indeed. I mean, are we talking about a level of preparedness up there, which, like I say, I've got the thermals on and it's only -1 in London, and it is, it's a major shocker for us here. We can't cope with this. We're us city beasts.
Nah.
But the idea that Scotland can just do it, insofar as your father didn't stop being a doctor just because he couldn't get out of the house for the snow.
No, indeed. We actually melted our way out on that occasion, and he had a Land Rover and would get around the practice. But the fact is that the climate is changing the conditions, and on the West Coast, where it's a lot wetter and generally a lot warmer, the problem has been way too much rain. So for the last several years, there's a particular road which runs from Loch Lomond up to Loch Gilphead, and it goes through a mountain pass called Rest and Be Thankful, which gives you an idea of, that it's a pretty...
Some choice word said as I stumble through the door.
Absolutely. And regularly the hillside collapses because it's just rain-soaked. And last year, there were several major landslides on that road and further north, which were the result of simply so much rain that the hill gives way, and it took months to clear. And I think that in the UK in general, we are going to find that our infrastructure and our engineering was built to standards of the previous 100 years, and the next 100 years are going to be very different. So we're going to have to spend a lot of money becoming more resilient.
It's 9:36 here in London. Isabel, let's have a look at some of the papers today. I know that you were very, very keen to talk about the UK Chancellor's Rachel Reeves's trip to China, something which has caused an almighty brouhaha here in the UK, not because of the potential risks of getting into bed with the Chinese, but the fact that Rachel Reeves appears to be having quite an interesting time managing the economy, to put it mildly. Things are going badly here in the UK. Borrowing is up, job prospects are down. It is not what the Labour government wants, and so Rachel Reeves has gone off to China to try to strike a deal. Can we sort of set aside the domestic political mess?
Gladly.
And concentrate on why Reeves is there, the intention, and also the usefulness to Beijing?
Right, and this is actually a very interesting topic. Before the election, you may recall that the Labour Party promised that they would do an audit of the UK-China relationship. And the hope was, amongst those of us who follow China and the UK, that this would result in a strategy. At the moment, we have a sort of set of... we have three words which govern our relationship with China, and everyone has a version of this. So they're kind of compete, confront, cooperate, or versions of the same. The EU has the same, kind of approach. The problem with that is that it doesn't tell you on any given day which of those you should favour, and they are regularly in competition with each other. So the idea that we would have a strategy which would go across government as it should, which would deal with the very tricky issues and the conflicts often between the desire for investment and the desire to do business, which are perfectly legitimate, and the real security issues that a changed China presents to the United Kingdom and the European Union and the United States, and the impact of all of that on the existing strategic relationships that the United Kingdom has. All that needed to be sorted out, and the expectation was that it would be as a result of this audit, and that we wouldn't embark on any major initiatives until that was done. However, since the election, we've had the Chancellor, the Foreign Minister of the United Kingdom has visited, and now the Chancellor of the Exchequer, with a team of bankers and finance people clearly trying to revive a rather flagging relationship between the City of London and Beijing. And none of the issues around security and the conflicts of interest that dog this relationship have been discussed. Instead, we have rather familiar, I've watched many delegations go to China over the years, and they follow a pattern. Plain load of businessmen or finance people go to China. They have lots of meetings. They issue a statement which promises a great deal. They sign memorandums of understanding. And if you go back a year later to see how much of that has materialized or how solid it was, it's often just a, recycling of a lot of words. And there's a bit of that in the statement that the Treasury issued last night about Rachel Reeves' achievements in China, which they promised, was it 600 million over 5 years?
What does that look like? It doesn't seem like a very big number.
It's a very, very small number when you consider that just in agriculture alone, the UK has lost 3 billion a year in trade with the European Union as a result of Brexit. So talking about eventually getting to 1 billion in benefit for the UK of this visit, and again, that's all promises. If you actually read the statement, it's all, we will, we agree, we encourage, yeah, good. But where's the deal?
And what areas of trade are we talking about? I mean, you mentioned agriculture there, and China is, having a problem with food security for its 1.4 billion hungry mouths. How does the United Kingdom even try to help? I mean, I'm just considering geographical size and what we produce. I'm not entirely sure what is going to be sent in those tankers or on those planes.
We may not solve the problem in bulk, but you may. Who knows? I mean, you're a very well-educated woman. Do you remember that one of Cameron's great achievements was to do a deal flogging pig semen to China in the golden era?
I'd forgotten. I'd conveniently forgot about that.
How could you have forgotten that?
I'm not entirely sure where the education lied for that one.
But the unsung exports of pig products from the UK has come up again. We are one part of the deal here is that we are going to be exporting lots of bits of the pig that we don't eat, very much like the tails and the ears and the trotters to China. It's not going to solve their food security problem.
That's not going to solve anyone's problems,
however,
not least of all the pigs.
Well, no, right. The pigs may have a view on this, but that's kind of the level we're talking about. Other than that, it was really about the City of London, because the City of London has long had the ambition to be the hub for the internationalization of the Chinese currency, the renminbi. There's a lot going on in China about state digital currencies, about finding alternatives to the dollar in global trade in order to circumvent sanctions, both for Russia and potentially for China if they were to invade Taiwan. And again, what is the UK position on that? If we are to become China's closest financial partner and, a partner in stock exchange tie-ups and so on, what position are we going to take if China does go full scale against the dollar in international trading? So there are lots of questions here, I think, which haven't really been answered.
Thank you for that, Isabel. Stay with us. We'll come back to you in a moment for the rest of today's papers, but let's head now to Ljubljana. Guy de Launey, Monocle's Balkan correspondent, is pitching into the Sunday party. A very good morning to you, Guy. How is it where you are?
Good morning, Emma. And it is, I can tell everybody, rather chilly in Ljubljana. -3 degrees at the moment, getting down as low as -7, I would have thought, during the evening in Ljubljana. But it is beautiful and sunny. And to be frank, I feel like this is a proper winter's day. I don't feel like it's a good thing when we've got 15 degrees and rain, as we did last week in Ljubljana. It's not quite right. This is a city which is surrounded by mountains and looks better in the snow.
I bet it sparkles.
Indeed it does. It sparkles and it tingles.
It tingles?
Yeah, well, your skin certainly does when you're out in temperatures like that.
We've just had our editorial director on a balcony in St Moritz at -16.2. So I think we're all we're positively tropical from our points of view. But I'm hoping the thermals are on. Okay, so we're all cold, but it's tingly. What news from your neck of the woods, please?
Well, it is the second round of the Croatian presidential election today, and this is a runoff. So we had the original election, the first round of the election, right at the end of 2024. We've whittled it down to two candidates who are the incumbent Zoran Milanovic, who's looking for a second term, and Dragan Primorac. And to give people an introduction to these two, if they're not familiar with them, Zoran Milanovic is ostensibly the centre-left, former leader of the Social Democrat Party, was Prime Minister of Croatia for a number of years, leaving office in 2016. Croatia joined the European Union on his watch. But it has to be said, during his first term as president, he's been more of a sort of populist shoot from the lip type than the sort of centre-left voice of reason that one might have expected. On the other side of things, Dragan Primorac is supported by the governing HDZ party. The HDZ is the dominant party of government in Croatia. It's very rarely out of office. But I have to say, in this election, Emma, as we know from our chat on the briefing a couple of days ago, it's very much the incumbent Zoran Milanovic who's the hot favourite to gain a second term.
You will be bringing us updates in the next couple of days, I'm absolutely sure. Let's move on to poor Zagreb. It usually does incredibly well when it comes to tourism and its advent, and it's had to concede that it's not done quite as well this year. Why?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, when we say not done quite as well, so we're looking at Zagreb Advent, which infamously won the title of Europe's best Christmas market 3 times in a row, and then was disqualified from running again so they could give somebody else a chance. Now, it's absolute apogee of its popularity was in 2019, the year before the pandemic, so 2019-2020 Zagreb Advent, when they had the greatest number of visitors, 243,000 overnight stays in that year. 252,000 overnight stays. Beg your pardon. This year, they got a mere 243,000. Okay, it's probably within a statistical margin of error, isn't it? But, it's quite an interesting one. Why post-pandemic, with the travel options back now on the agenda for people, why are we not seeing increases in Zagreb Advent? And some people reckon it's the money, honey. It's because everything's got a bit too expensive in Zagreb and in Croatian tourism as a whole. And the particular villain of the piece, which is being used to exemplify this, is the Dubai chocolate fritule. And fritule, basically teeny-weeny little Croatian donuts. Dubai chocolate being the TikTok sensation, which people have been trying to get or make for themselves. And they've done some sort of concoction of this at the stalls in Zagreb, and they've been selling this for about 5 times the price of your usual little packet of humble Croatian donuts. And people are scratching their heads about this, or rather going a bit red in the face about it and saying it's all wrong. You shouldn't be making these things terribly expensive. But I have to tell you, having been there, the queues outside the stalls for these Dubai chocolate drizzled fritule seem to indicate people felt otherwise.
Are they any good?
Don't know. Didn't queue long enough. I don't like queues, Emma. I like the fritule. The fritule themselves are perfectly good.
You're a British guy. It's in your DNA to queue.
Yeah, I'm weird though, aren't I? I've lived out of the UK for 20 years at this point, so I've lost that bit of Britishness in me. I think I tend to find ways around queues. I don't jump them, but you often find the queues are existing, and that perhaps you don't need to be queuing in them at all. Just have a little look around, and you may find another way through things. So that's what I tend to do, I'm afraid.
Help me out a little bit with Dubai chocolate.
Yeah, so this is the thing. I mean, if you're into TikTok, are you into TikTok, Emma?
What do you think?
It went very, very quiet there, so I'm thinking not. I'm not, but my daughter is. My daughter tells me about all these things all the time, but she's of the age for it. But there was an English-Egyptian, a British-Egyptian entrepreneur who lives in Dubai, and she created this phenomenon, which is everybody calls Dubai chocolate. She put basically pistachios and phyllo pastry sandwiched between layers of chocolate. So there's sort of mix of, if you like, Swiss chocolate and Middle Eastern confectionery. And this went viral on TikTok, and everybody's been trying to replicate it. So what you get at the Christmas market stalls in Zagreb probably hasn't come from Dubai. It's probably somebody knocking up their version thereof, which is perhaps another reason to avoid it.
Okay, and then you drizzle it on donuts. I mean, I can just see it. And then you go to hospital. Yeah,
it seems like. But I have to tell you, I just saw when I was ploughing through the Croatian news headlines, I saw that the hygiene patrol had been out going around Yeah, so they've been going around the Christmas market stalls in Zagreb, which is very reassuring. I mean, this is one of the reasons why, for example, Singapore is one of the very, very few places in the world where I will eat street food. Somebody who lives in Southeast Asia, if you want to carry on living in Southeast Asia without various things living inside you, which you don't want living inside you, you don't do street food. Singapore, you can because the hawker markets are all inspected by the hygiene inspectors. Same with Zagreb Christmas market, which I find very reassuring. And they only found 2 violations during the entire run of Zagreb Christmas market, which was largely involving meat products not being stored correctly. So I think he was safe with the Dubai chocolate, at least from a hygiene point of view.
Marvellous. Thank you very much indeed. And I'm now going to spend the next 300 and however many days are left of 2025 looking at TikTok for chocolate and phyllo pastry.
Woohoo!
Perhaps
I think it was phyllo pastry. I mean, goodness knows. I mean, I'm not really, terribly good at the details on these things. I mean, just give me a bit of 95% dark chocolate and I'm happy, Emma.
So fancy. Right, let's move on to what's happening in Slovenian cycling. This is something that you the last time we spoke on the radio, you wanted to talk to us about a skier, and now you want to talk about cycling. So this is you're now becoming our Balkans sporting correspondent, Guy.
Well, you know that in my dim and distant past, I was the sports news correspondent for the BBC, and in sports news kind of means not really doing the sport itself, but doing all the sort of gritty bits or slightly more boring bits around it, from the politics to the business, but also juicy stuff like doping scandals and the like. So I do like a bit of the old sport, and Slovenia has the greatest cyclists in the world. I mean, it's bizarre. Our little country here of 2 million people, in terms of male cycling at any rate, men's cycling, we've got the greatest cyclists in the world. And the absolute number one is Tadej Pogačar, who last cycling season, 2024, people were saying that he had completed cycling. You know how you get these claims that, somebody has completed a particular thing, that they've done everything that there is to do and they've ticked it all off, and there are no more worlds for them to conquer, because he won the Tour de France for the 3rd time. He won the Giro d'Italia. He won the World Championships. He won several of the most prestigious one-day races as well. And it was the greatest season that anybody's seen by a male cyclist since the 1970s and the days of Eddie Merckx. So this is why quite a number of people were absolutely terrified to see Tadej Pogačar's Strava account, and this is the sort of exercise / social media app which keeps a record of your physical activity. And Tadej Pogačar is one of the many professional sports people who makes their Strava profile public so that mere mortals can follow what he's doing. And he posted an update of him doing cross-country skiing at a very rapid rate. And now, of course, everybody's petrified about whether Tadej Pogačar is going to, having conquered cycling, whether he's going to turn his hand to Nordic skiing just to annoy everybody.
Guy de Launey, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the line from Ljubljana. Isabel, just listening to that, do you do cross-country skiing when you go up to the Highlands, or is this something that no, this is parties? I'm looking at you. No, I do not. A little bit earlier today, at the beginning of the programme, you talked about how we're going to turn Trump and Musk off. How do we do that in 2025 when we actually know that we should arguably be spending even more attention watching them and just being mindful of the directions that they are pushing things?
I guess so. But honestly, last week, with this sort of volume of meaningless noise, which really it fills your head and it means you can't really think about things that matter. My point is that a lot of this is simply noise. Clearly Trump is not going to send troops to take over Greenland. And, Musk's interference in European and British politics it creates noise, but it doesn't actually advance anything. And we have to find a way of focusing on what matters and ignoring them, because most of the time they're not going to do what they say they're going to do.
And the point you raise, prompted a lot of sort of soul searching by the likes of Denmark, who said, well, how do we actually respond to the fact when Donald Trump said, I want to buy Greenland? I mean, Denmark has to take it seriously, but at the same time, it has to not worry that it needs to be on high alert. And it reminded me of something that someone said to me before Trump was re-elected. They said, if he comes back, remember, last time we took him literally, but we didn't take him seriously. This time we take Trump very, very seriously, but we have to learn not to take him literally, because if you do, those 5 a.m. tweets, and now being compounded by Elon Musk wading into everywhere, seem to get that will absolutely exhaust the entire world.
It exhausts the entire world and it fills all the space. And that's the point. I mean, let's take seriously Trump on Greenland. The fact is that the United States has looked after Greenland's defence since the Second World War. It's got a base. It has absolute control over what it does. And that is not affected by the question of Greenland's sovereignty. So also, I find the idea that Trump is suddenly keen on defending the free world slightly surprising, given what he has said to South Korea about, you have to pay up or we're not interested. To Taiwan, you're stealing our technology, ironically enough. I mean, he hasn't exactly been a solid ally in terms of the defence of the free world. So what is he really after in Greenland? It's clearly not about defending the free world. It's much more, in my view, about access to minerals and Greenland's resources. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about what the real issue is and not be completely snowed by the nonsense that Trump talks. If you look at what he said last time he was elected, he was going to build a wall and lock up various people. He didn't build a wall. He didn't lock up anybody. And honestly, if you look at what he's promised this time, he's going to resolve the Ukraine war on day one. He's going to sort the Middle East and deport millions of people he terms illegal aliens. If you want to make some money, I would make a bet on none of those things happening.
I was introduced to the concept of main character syndrome this weekend, which by all accounts, I am not a psychologist, but it's not necessarily a defined mental health disorder, but it is something when you believe that you are absolutely at the heart of every single story. You are the central character, even if it might not in fact be your story. And I wonder whether we just sort of frame it within a kind of a main character syndrome story here. Because you have Elon Musk saying, I am now in charge of European politics.
Yeah, absolutely. With Elon Musk, I think that's, I think that's absolutely relevant. And I think that once you've defined it that way, just look away. Don't let him, don't let him impose that on us, because then we're accepting his narrative. And we all know that authoritarian states and authoritarian political personalities put enormous effort into dominating the narrative, because that's all they've got. Elon Musk isn't going to deliver anything for Europe or for the United Kingdom, and nor is Donald Trump. So it's all about controlling the story, and that is something that we do have some influence on.
We do. It's difficult though, because we actually obviously can't control what they are going to say, because in certain situations we're not entirely sure that that many of these protagonists actually can control what they're saying themselves. But what we can do about it is very difficult, because we are arguably in a world where direct persuasion is not something that's actually going to work. And as we saw in the run up to the elections, the negative narrative is beating the positive one at the moment.
Yeah, it is. And this is, the very well-known phenomenon that formal media, which do check facts, which do news gathering, which do produce responsible news, are being swamped by the social media phenomenon, which is all about the economy of outrage. But again, there are things we can do about this. Our governments can control or regulate social media, and I think the time is, way past when we need to be doing that. Brazil is an example here. Brazil has challenged the lifting of moderation from Meta and said, explain yourself or we'll shut you down in Brazil. If Brazil can do it, why can't the UK?
Isabel Hilton, thank you so much for joining me around the studio table today. And thanks also to our guest, Guy de Launey, and to our editorial director, Tyler Brûlé. The programme was produced by Desiree Bandley and Carla Turabello. Our studio engineer was Alan Weedon. I'm Emma Nelson. Monocle on Sunday returns next week. But until then, goodbye. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of your weekend.